Welcome back to the Dr. Jess Show podcast. I am really excited to have Marilyn DeWitt with us. Y'all have a gut, so this is going to be a really hot topic and important conversation that we're going to have. Essentially, just kind of how your gut and your pelvic floor are like best friends. They're sisters. They're connected, right? When something's not quite right in one, the other, you might be noticing symptoms that we're going to kind of clue you in on today. Tell us a little bit more about you and your background and like what drove you into this field. What made you want to specialize in gut health? Tell us everything.
Yes, I know the whole story. So, gosh, it goes way back. So my background is in nursing, actually, in the hospitals and a lot of kind of critical care. And I was always the woman asking why. You know, I just couldn't get enough of the why.
Yes.
But I did feel like from the conventional lens, it was really just scratching the surface. So I couldn't entirely grasp what the underlying root cause to a lot of the disease that we were seeing in hospitals were. So very long story short, as we all do, I ran into some of my own health challenges, went to my own PCP and was told just because I was a woman, sometimes these things happen. And that literally was the starting point for me. It was not good enough.
So that should be illegal.
Illegal. I know. I like to say I fired my doctor because it just, to me, it was unacceptable. And so that's where it all began. So I really just delved back into school, went back to school, became certified in functional medicine. Years down the track, here I am. So that's sort of the very, very long story short, but it's just been amazing being able to now support other women.
Absolutely. So they don't have to have that kind of response like you did.
No.
They can have a clearer path and not really have such a journey to figure it out, maybe.
Yeah, and that's what I hear. And as I'm sure you do as well, time and time again, is that people are going to their primaries or going to the providers, but they're not feeling seen or heard or validated, or that it's all in their head, or that everything looks fine, when you and I both know there's a lot more to it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm really excited for the conversation because another thing I hear often in our team here is that, you know, you have to go see this person and that person and then this person, and nobody's really looking at, you know, especially providers. I mean, it's tough to see the big picture if you're only zoning in on this one thing.
Right.
So to be able to share with people that have multiple different things going on, maybe have a major symptom that they are starting with, but also to not lose sight of the other, you know, parts of the body and systems that can also contribute to that main symptom.
100%. The body's so interconnected. And it's like I, speak to my own clients and tell them the same idea. It's that the body is symbiotic and all of those systems are working together. And I think what speaks volumes is the fact that we have all of these different specialties in medicine that are hyper-focused on that one organ or that one system, where we know that they all work synergistically.
Yeah. It's like we're not pieces and parts. We're a unit. And it all needs to function well together.
Yes.
So from your journey to now really kind of you have a thriving practice, or you see clients, Monday, is it Monday through Thursday or Monday through Wednesday?
Yeah, Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday. And you're mainly virtual.
Yes, right? Exclusively virtual.
Love that. And so anybody anywhere could work with you.
Nationwide. Yeah.
What are the most common types of things that people connect with you about, and what are you finding in terms of like similarities with whether it's men or women and things that they're trying to
achieve and shift? Yeah, for sure. So I will say I exclusively work with women.
Okay. Yeah.
I am a woman. I'm
that,
a right sister. I'm a daughter. So to me, it's just a really special population to be able to pour all of my heart and soul into. But primarily I have women because I have really niched down, coming to me with either acute onset or chronic GI issues and or hormone imbalances that tend to go hand in hand, which not everyone always recognizes. So primarily I see, clients coming to me with anything from diagnoses or labels, as I call them. SIBO, IBS, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, reflux, anything GI related, even food sensitivities, and then the hormonal piece of it that ties in really tightly as well. So anxiety, fatigue, mood imbalance, heavy painful periods, which I'm sure you see, all of this and more. Again, the body's interconnected, right? So we really see a whole umbrella of symptoms.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of our patients that we get to work with for pelvic health concerns are also dealing with whether it's IBS or SIBO or something gut related. Maybe they're having trouble emptying completely or at all has happened here. Men too, though. That's and sometimes it's post surgical. Things are not functioning the way they used to, and they're just kind of told to wait a month and see how you are. And, it really just kind of slows that healing process down. If I'm speaking honestly about it, whether it's like a C-section surgery and then everything's, motility is different. They're on medications, like that's a factor. And I wish it's slowly starting to change. It really is.
We're getting there.
And but it needs to be faster, in my opinion. Our generation, though, I think what I see is younger women are not waiting as long as our main patient, like our baby boomer patient, and they feel like finally they can help themselves because their kids are out of the house, maybe, or they want to feel good for this next chapter in life, playing with their grandkids and all the things, but their daughters are like, nope, I have this thing, like that's not normal. I want to adjust it now.
Yes.
So they see what their mom or aunt or grandmother had gone through.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a nice empowering thing to see a shift in.
Yeah, 100%. And I see the same as well. And I think that just the state, unfortunately, that healthcare is in at the moment, it's either there's no other choice because they've kind of hit a dead end, which I don't know, for better or worse, that's us. We're the dead end in all of the best ways, or just like you said, I think they're just more proactive in their health, and we're finally starting to understand what it means to be a human, and in my case, what it means to be a woman, and what we can expect and what we have learned to normalize versus what it actually means to feel good in our mind and bodies.
Oh, absolutely, 1,000%. And not to get too off topic, but even there are several PCP, my own PCP actually, they just went out of network. They're now from 3,000 patients to 300 patients because they want to give you that full hour, which is rare and it's great. I love that. Right. But people have a choice, and they have direct access, so they can choose, and I think that the majority of the patients we get to work with, they have tried other things. They want to try anything, really. And it's sometimes you don't know what to even start with. Right. And there can be a lot of misinformation out there, too, which is
so much
sad because, you're not sure. I'm going to try this thing. This was, you have to be careful what you read, of course.
Yes.
But finding somebody that is an actual, specialist and has the credentials and has, more than just, that sort of influencer, status behind them. You have to be tough. You can't follow this.
There's a lot out there. And I think as well, when it comes to functional medicine in particular, and of course, pelvic floor therapy, it's not a one size fits all approach. I can't tell you how many women, and I'm sure you've heard the same in your own, dynamics, but who have come to me saying they've tried the probiotics and they've tried this and they've tried that and the diets and the FODMAPs and everything in between. But you are a unique human. You have your own birth story and your own health history and your own stressors and triggers and environmental factors and exposures. So all of that comes into play. Healing is not an overnight, right? It's a matter of peeling back, as I say, the layers of the onion, and it's non-linear, right?
For us, it's the orange.
I think I like orange better. I love that.
But same thing, same idea. And like we some people we get to work with, they might have started with a Pilates instructor who was telling them this is how you treat your pelvic floor, or like, and they're not, they don't mean any ill will. It's just, an actual unique assessment is the best way to start, and to really figure out what is that root cause contributing 100%. To everything versus, just trying stuff, because it can be defeating to try all these things and then not get
It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, and you're spending time and energy and money, and I hate to say, but the stress of that alone is just exacerbating all of those symptoms.
Same things,
It's this like revolving door of disease, if you will, and sort of this cascade effect. And then at the end of the day, where does that leave us, right? So I think being able to have more of that personalized approach and to be able to have that accountability and that guidance and support is absolutely essential for full resolution, and then the sustainable healing moving forward.
Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, the labels thing and the dis-ease, or I like to kind of share that because we talk about that here often, of that lack of ease in the body is essentially what it is. So whether that's with the gut and the motility and how everything is flowing, or, you know, even somewhere in your neck or jaw. I mean, there's a connection from your jaw to your pelvic floor. And there's, you know, a lot of science and research out there to, you know, show through fascial lines how that works. But again, if you put a mouth guard in, let's say you're fixing a TMJ issue, like, are you really fixing the problem, or are you masking it?
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting, and everybody has their own way of going about it. But I think we can both attest to, you know, the benefits of treating a whole person, and tissue holds memory and emotion too. So any type of trauma, even like your own fall, you know, skiing, let's say, or snowboarding, for me, that's a trauma. Your birth into this world is everybody's first trauma.
Right.
So, you know, and the subconscious piece is huge, because obviously you're not aware of the things that are being said, right, as a brand new baby in this world, but it gets stored.
100%.
And I've seen that happen too. You know, people have sometimes trouble wearing turtlenecks, or anything restrictive here, and maybe the umbilical cord was stuck, right? Or maybe, you know, something else happened. It could be multiple different things.
Right.
But that's still, that tissue memory is there. And so, yeah, we have patients with gut issues, or have had really great success stories. Again, like households you've brought up in. If you're holding tension and if you're on guard, and like that can a lot of times contribute to IBS, and just, you know, even with men, erectile dysfunction, all that tension, holding it in, and always never knowing, like, when do I have to be on high alert, or when, you know, it's
hypervigilance.
Yeah. What you mentioned, the FODMAP, and I want to have you share that with everybody listening, because I don't know that everybody really knows what that is and how it can apply.
Yeah. Well, yes. So I would love to speak to that, and I'll circle back really quickly, because I love just quickly everything that you were speaking to when it comes to birth and the birth trauma and childhood, because I think just quickly a lot of men and women assume that their symptoms have just shown up all of a sudden. This is what I'm experiencing, but this is the other piece, I think, in finding someone who can really dig in deep with you, is the fact that we go all the way back, because it didn't just start. Although there might be a trigger that maybe sent you over the edge, it's really important to recognize and acknowledge, just like you said, the traumas and the triggers, because that play a massive role in gut dysfunction as well. So
I love that. And one of the things we sometimes ask, or not all the time, we'll ask, you know, can you remember a time when you didn't feel these things? And it's usually, it does go way back. They'll sit with it for a minute, which I love, because I really want to kind of feel into it. And most often, more times than not, it goes back to, you know, an early childhood, or not always, but a lot of times, or, you know, something that they dealt with recently that then wasn't a big deal at the time, but it kind of slowly built up. And then all of a sudden everything is out of kilter. And it's definitely easy to think that, you know, I have this thing right here, and it's just this thing that I need to get better, but is it really just that? Or did you whack your head, you know, and you felt some compression, and then that affected your nerves, and now your pelvis is out of alignment. So it's a whole thing.
We go way upstream.
It really,
And that's where, so the FODMAP, so that's very loaded question. I know that there's so much to it. And so we can kind of pull it together. So for example, right, so we have to ask, just like with everything, the why, right? The underlying root cause. So if someone is or has trialed a FODMAP diet and it has helped, and then maybe perhaps they've come off of FODMAP, which is really where we're essentially limiting, or like highly restricting, or maybe entirely removing, depending on, you know, who you've worked with in the past, to try and help ease some of the bloat or indigestion or constipation, diarrhea, because those particular foods are very fermentable, what we call in the gut. And so if there are any sort of bacterial overgrowths happening within the gut, that's almost like a feast and food fodder for them to really continue to consume, and then off gas their methane, hydrogen, whatever it is that might be going on. However, it is not the bacteria that is the root cause. It's what's happening, as we keep speaking to, what's upstream of that. If we're coming from an incredibly stressful childhood, or maybe we have had our traumas or relationships, or maybe it's work stressors or finances, whatever it may be, we know that stress has a massive upstream impact on our downstream digestion. So Why would we need to go FODMAP? Well, maybe we are struggling with any sort of digestive symptom, like we've mentioned. Yeah. Why? There's a possibility that in a high stress, chronic stress environment or situation, we end up having lower levels of stomach acid. Okay, so now
can't really neutralize
right. So stomach acid is critical. So oftentimes I'll have women who come to me with, for example, reflux, and they've been put on an antacid or PPI, and then they wonder why they're still struggling with symptoms. Where the reality is that it can oftentimes be a low stomach acid type of situation driving that reflux discomfort, bloating. We need stomach acid to break down the foods we're consuming so they don't travel downstream lower into the gut to allow for bacterial overgrowths, gas, bloating, to have to then trial FODMAP to begin with.
So it's like, instead of starting with the medication, start with an elimination process to really kind of see if that is necessary. And if so, obviously make sure it's the correct dose, but try out these different things to kind of rule out where is this actually coming from.
Right, right. Because at the end of the day, we may be able to take a medication to kind of alleviate symptoms, but we also, I think,
all mask.
Realize at this point it's masking, or it's like that Band-Aid effect. And so while it may temporarily alleviate symptoms, even if you're going low FODMAP, right, or you're taking an antacid, what we know is it's still not addressing that root cause. And so that simmering infectious dynamic or inflammation could still technically be at play, driving other, imbalance elsewhere in the body. Yeah. Which is why you'll oftentimes see other imbalances downstream of the gut. Right.
When it comes to medications, just made me think about, let's say you had to go on some type of antibiotic and, it cured whatever symptoms you were dealing with, if it was like a cold or something pelvic health related, which we see a lot here. Mm-hmm. But then, obviously it takes your good and bad bacteria. Mm-hmm. We have some women too that will report they can never really get rid of that belly, inflammation and sort of, what are some of the ways that they can kind of combat that, aside from, trying to build up the, eat something like yogurt to build up the good bacteria? Yeah. Is there something that is like a quicker cleanse that, if there's no other like real root source, if there's nothing that's like a secondary contributor?
Right. So with antibiotics, right, that's a perfect example, because just like you said, right, we know that they will wipe out the bad bacteria, but unfortunately, as with many things, they'll wipe out the good bacteria as well. And those good bacteria, we have trillions, right, of these microorganisms residing within our gut, and they are important for many different roles in the body, supporting our immune system. About 2/3 of our immune system is housed within the gut. Our neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, also produced in the gut, regulating our hormones, right? So estrogen, there's something called an estrobolone within the gut, all in and of itself. So if we're wiping out a lot of those good bacteria, what can potentially happen is we can have those more pathogenic and or what we call opportunistic bacteria taking over the gut, creating this gas, right, and this bloating. So what can we do? First and foremost, honestly, if I have someone coming to me that have chronic and or acute, onset GI symptoms, would be a GI map stool test. Okay. So that's a comprehensive stool test that will show us the good bacteria, the bad bacteria, and really your digestive health overall. So that's great for targeted use and for really deep insight as far as what's happening in your unique gut microbiome. But of course, food as medicine, right? And food first. So reestablishing some of those good bacteria, just like you said, with probiotics, really important. Also pulling in what we call the prebiotics to feed the probiotics. So things like garlic, onion, leek, greener bananas, right? Some of your resistant type starches are going to be really helpful to help rebuild the abundance of the bacteria.
What about something like a celery juice cleanse? I know that is particularly helpful for the gut. Is that something that could naturally can help be supportive? It's kind of like with all things. I had actually speaking to a client earlier today who was inquiring about cleansing. Again, we can take the antacids, we can use FODMAP, but what we really want to do is look to identify that underlying why. So, there are so many different supplements and cleanses and juices out there. But I think what's important is that we understand that it's not a blanket approach, and that it's important so that we're using targeted recommendations rather than sort of throwing in the dark and just hoping that something works or sticks. No, that makes sense. So I guess take us through a little bit about when you get to start with a client and you've kind of gone through their history and you've gotten to the root cause of their, symptoms.
Sure.
They're on a plan with you. I mean, I can imagine they have homework to do at home and you're like, guiding them along. Take us through what that experience is like for anybody listening and might be interested, because I didn't really know this was a thing where you could have, a gut doctor like this and that follows you long term. I think that's amazing, because unlike what we do, I mean, average, care plan is a couple of months, but you're more specialized in terms of the length of time you get to work with, these clients. What is that like? And is it different from patient? Is it always a specific amount of time?
Yep. So what I find gold standard is about 6 months. If I have a woman coming in who has been struggling with GI symptoms, we all know that it didn't happen overnight, right? Yeah. I'm sure the same with you and your own patients. So it's not going to
magically disappear
overnight. It takes time, I know, right? However, that being said, the things that I teach my clients through the program that I have with them is incredibly educational, because my goal at the end of the day is, yes, to resolve symptoms, but further to that, to not only help them feel better, but to stay better, to maintain and sustain the progress that they've made, to understand their triggers if they are still there at the end of the day, but also to understand what they need to do on a day-to-day basis so that they have this health and longevity for years to come. So typically what I do is I do dive deep out with clients with an initial consultation to really deeply understand who they are as a person, where they came from, their walk of life, their lifestyle, and again, environment. Once I am able to sort of connect the dots and pull all of those pieces together, that really does help me to further identify root causes, in addition to functional lab testing. So it might be a GI map stool test like we spoke about. It might be something called Dutch hormone testing, which helps us to better understand women's hormones, their adrenal health, their cortisol output. And sometimes we'll even run comprehensive functional labs so we can have a really deep look at what is optimal from the functional lens, aside from what's normal from the conventional lens. And then we're really just working together one-on-one in a very concierge and private coaching type of manner. So meeting every other week, kind of back pocket access. I'm available on a daily basis for questions as needed. And we really work through everything from the results of lab testing to things like nutrition and what is going to help.
Do you eat? Yeah. Yes. What can you do to help? And with this testing, I mean, I'm sure everywhere you have a local lab you recommend here, I'm sure.
Yep.
And then that lab sends you the results, or do you guys go over them together? What's that process like?
Yeah, so all of the above. Yeah. So what is nice is that the majority of the testing is actually quite convenient. Things, for example, like the GI map stool test shows up on your doorstep.
Oh, cool.
Your FedEx man will deliver it to you. So that shows up on your doorstep, so you can just literally just collect one specimen from the comfort of your home. The lovely FedEx man comes and picks it up from your doorstep, nice and packaged up. Yeah, and the same with the Dutch test. And then serum labs, wherever you are local, we can go ahead and have some blood work done. The results come back to me in a matter of days to maybe a couple of weeks if it's more of that, deeper testing. Right. And then we get to work and we go through the entire process, really optimizing the gut microbiome, supporting hormones so that everything not only from digestion improves and hormone balance, but things like energy, right, and mood and periods,
amazing.
Right, cycles, and sort of everything in between. So it's a very comprehensive approach.
I guess what I'm curious, like what percentage of your clients would, if you can think off the top of your head, would have shared or might also be experiencing a secondary trigger like a pelvic dysfunction, or do they share these things with you? Are they kind of not thinking to talk about that? I know our patients always talk about, we encourage them, we want to know it all. Because they always head to toe. So tell me all the things. And our intake form takes you a decent half hour. I'm not joking.
Oh, yeah. I know what I'm saying.
But I guess, is it a high percentage? I'd say at least 75% of our patients have a gut contributing, factor involved.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I work with women, so I think everyone needs to see pelvic floor PT, regardless of whether or not you've, had children or not. I just think it's so important because you would be much more well-versed to speak to the fact that, regardless of just being a woman, right, and having this pelvic floor and the, possibility of childbearing as well, trauma and stressors and how much that can shift, right, the pelvic floor, and then how, again, that can impact impact, the gut microbiome and the gut brain axis.
Yeah. And just honestly, like anything that you do repetitively throughout a day, whether it's occupation wise or just any task that's repetitive in nature, that can contribute to restrictions, postural restrictions that affect your pelvic floor too. So maybe you're an office worker, you sit at your desk and you're, hunched over all day. Well, that's going to compress your diaphragm and your hip flexors and your pelvic floor. And it's a part of, that whole area. So it's not, sometimes, trauma is a big key, but just like day to day, maybe you are a brand new mom and you're, rocking baby and you're nursing and you're putting baby in the crib and like all these kind of things are hunching you forward. That can compress and create tension in the pelvic floor too. And it's wild to think like, way back when, before I decided to specialize in pelvic floor, like you're not thinking about all these things, but I mean, how many things are you thinking about now that could be, right? Right. It's a lot of the techniques we do external wise are like this. So again, it's like that forward sort of rounding in, compressing everything. Right. And sitting, maybe like a decade ago, got the phrase was coined, sitting's the new smoking, right? Because everything slows down. Absolutely. And so standing desks are amazing. If you have the ability to get up and down, but what would be, some of like the top tips you could share with people just listening in about, if they don't currently have a gut health concern, what are some things that they could do consistently maybe, or just be thinking about in the background to kind of prevent anything from popping up? And I will say, just one little side note is you don't necessarily have to have GI symptoms to have dysbiosis within the gut. So it can also be systemic issues as well. Okay. So gut systemic inflammation. I Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, once said disease begins in the gut. And I really wholeheartedly believe that. And just clinically speaking, have seen it. But that being said, there are so many amazing things that you can do, little things on a day-to-day basis. So of course we can go deep and get into all of the nuanced, recommendations, but honestly, breathing. And this would probably be one of your top tips, I would imagine. Really breathing. So being able to really get that diaphragm engaged and to be able to really be able to activate what we call that parasympathetic nervous system, or that rest and digest mode, as most people know. We tend to live and are primed for this fight or flight response. Superficial breath up here. 100%. So I think just trying to get in some deep breathing, maybe 3 times a day, and it can be what we call habit stacking. So maybe if you're sitting down to have a meal, we all have to eat at some point, right? Hopefully we're not doing it in a really hurried fashion, because this can also create digestive issues downstream, but maybe just taking some nice, slow, deep breaths right before you consume your food. Then we are in that rest and digest state. So we're then optimally digesting and absorbing our food. So breathing would be huge. I think also chewing your food. It sounds that's so very simple. True. From someone who inhales my food. Right. Yeah, because we're all busy, right? That's undeniable. And it's, we're always going to have stressors coming at us. We just can't get past it. And so what can we do? Just the little things that help to optimize our gut, therefore our hormones and our brain health, right? So I think chewing your food, on average, we chew about 5 times and then we swallow our food. We need to be chewing each bite about 20 times. 20 times. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I know. So that is everyone's, first task. But about 20 times until it's about an applesauce type consistency, because then we're able to actually absorb and break down the nutrients we're consuming. So a lot of women who are eating healthy and they're doing all the right things and they're moving their bodies, just take a very gentle, objective, look at, and that kind of a pull out and see, what does your day-to-day look like? Are we rushing through the day? Are we standing and eating hurriedly? These are the things that can really impact not only digestion, but overall health. Oh, absolutely. That's a great tip. And just 20 bites, you said. 20 sounds like great, because you'd be able to really enjoy that. Yes. And then slow it down and savor it. Yeah, 100%. Think about that. For sure. Yeah. And it's because that's the reality, is that digestion, a lot of people have heard, for how long you are what you eat. Oh, yeah. And we are actually what we eat,
what we digest, absorb, and then get past the cell membrane. So it's not as simple, right? So chewing your food is going to make it that much easier for your body to be able to absorb these foods and top down, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm always, just to talk about liquids for a second, that along that same idea of telling people not to chug their water all day when they deal with bladder issues like incontinence or urgency or, anything. It's when you have restrictions in your body, whether that's from gut stuff or anything else, trauma, it's kind of like pouring water over a rock. It just slicks off the surface. So it won't even permeate down to that cell membrane and hydrate your interstitial fully, but it's still good to drink. When those restrictions are starting to open up, it will pass through and get down to that interstitia, but slow sips throughout the day are so much better, and they're going to hydrate you better and keep you hydrated
100%.
versus just kind of like chugging that
100%
liter, whatever it is.
Yes.
And yes, we drink a lot here, shakes, through the day. We drink a lot of protein. I do anyway. And so I catch myself they're so delicious.
They're so good.
But just slow sips, and
slow sips throughout the day. Yeah. That's it. And especially like little tip, because I know a lot of women are busy. I will use protein drinks sometimes as well to supplement that protein intake, which is so important, all you ladies out there, to be able to support overall health and vitality. But even with smoothies or protein drinks, whatever it might be, we almost want to act as though we're chewing in a way to stimulate that stomach acid. And the same goes for, just like you said, trying not to chug our water with meals, because that will actually further dilute stomach acid.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that will
you're
be
kind of like that peristaltic leg.
Yeah, not going over the top and making yourself crazy. But just signaling to your brain that it's time to, release the stomach acid, because protein needs stomach acid to be able to actually denature and break into smaller little compounds. So, so if we're hydrating and we're drinking and we're doing it in a quick state, all of that beautiful protein that we've been told to consume on a daily basis is maybe all for naught if we're not doing it in the most effective way as far as digestion goes.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. To consider. If your protein is in a water, form, is that and you're actively kind of, trying to chew, doing that, is your body, going to, let's say you have a 40, gram protein shake, is your body going to take all of that in? Or is it the first like 30% it doesn't? Is there something to that? Where you need to kind of take in maybe like double the amount of protein?
No, I protein shakes are protein shakes. So ideally you're getting it, from a quality source, and it's a full, complete protein. I do like a beef isolate if you, don't mind your animal proteins. But again, stomach acid is crucial. So you can even, if at home you have your, your own serum lab work. Not that I am interpreting, but you can have a look at the protein and see, if it's within optimal range there, because that can be indicative of whether or not we do actually have that stomach acid on board to then be absorbing those proteins. Proteins are the building blocks of life, right? So it is really important that we have them. But animal proteins are, my preferred source just as a complete protein. But of course, I have plenty of, vegetarians as well, vegans that we pescatarians work with to get the optimal protein input. So as long as, again, top down, your body and your digestion are working in a way that it is able to absorb those proteins, then you should be able to take them on board. And that includes the stomach acid, your bile flow for fat absorption, things like your pancreatic enzymes, all really important that we have those functioning optimally so that we can then, absorb everything that we are fueling our bodies with.
Yes. Oh, and you mentioned earlier on you work with women in sort of like that menopause age range. Or you deal a lot with, hormones, and essentially somebody that is, in like a perimenopause stage.
Sure.
Maybe it's like 45, or even at 40, I guess, could be nearing that. Are there any specific sort of recommendations? I know it's kind of vague, but for that age range that you could share on what to do if you start to notice, the fatigue, or you notice things that could also signal gut warning signs. I know like a lot of our patients, it's bloating, it's sort of like this stagnant area. This area comes up a lot for women. It's a very vulnerable area. Some people were just kind of brought up to suck it all in and hold it tight, which can contribute to pelvic floor and gut issues. Or some people clench their glute area, which affects bowels and motility there. And I think the key, the body is changing. Obviously, hormones are significantly changing. Some people are here, like, taking hormones and trying to kind of supplement and taking testosterone in there for fatigue. And it's a whole thing.
It is a
You
whole
work
thing.
with that as well, or do you kind of refer out for that type of thing when it comes to
hormones? Hormones are like so intricate and a whole topic in and of themselves. But yes, average menopause is about 51 years old. And what we know is that perimenopause can begin anywhere from about a decade before that. And I am like at the start of it, luckily, like no symptoms just yet, but I'm of that kind of age where I'm starting to think about all of these other options and what I really need to optimize and prioritize in order to make my way through this next decade with ease, right? Because I think that there's this big stigma with perimenopause and menopause that we have to go through these horrific changes. However, if we can support our body from really this foundational level, especially going into peri, we really need to be leaning into things like our self-care, right? Yes. Self-care is not selfish, but for a reason. We know that, our three primary sex hormones being estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they do naturally start to dip going into perimenopause. Testosterone does tend to dip earlier than, say, estrogen, for example, and we need testosterone as women in particular for things like libido and muscle mass and focus and memory and motivation. So a lot of women that are starting to come into this perimenopausal phase, might start feeling a little bit less motivated. Maybe their libido is really down. Maybe they're losing that muscle mass. We also know that estrogen helps to maintain what we call insulin resistance. So if we're starting to notice some of that, maybe, excess adipose tissue, maybe some of that belly fat kind of area, insulin resistance can also be at play, or blood sugar imbalance is a kind of a simple way to think about it. So really leaning into nutrition, getting your protein on board, but also getting your fiber. Fiber is so underrated, not only for perimenopausal, but literally the entire population, right? We know that colon cancer is on the rise. Why? We're pushing protein. We also are dealing with the standard American diet, but fiber is huge, not only for helping to bind and excrete hormones, but also manage things like excess cholesterol. And again, the gut does house these bacteria that help to regulate estrogen as well. So, if liver is a bit sluggish, if bile is a bit sluggish, and we have some imbalance, dysbiosis within the gut with those bacteria, we can start seeing some hormonal imbalance as well. So leaning into your proteins, your good, healthy fats is really important. And of course, plenty of fiber. So get in your fruits, your veg, your, nuts, seeds, legumes, potatoes and whatnot. And nervous system is also massive because the adrenals start to take over as our ovaries start to kind of take a back seat. So we really want to make sure that we're supporting our adrenal glands, which are typically responsible for not only cortisol, stress hormone, but also our other sex hormones down the road and later perimenopause. So I would say nutrition and self-care is absolutely massive when it comes to this kind of phase of hormone. And then, of course, we could potentially talk all things, bioidenticals and whatnot, but maybe another story for another time.
Yeah. And like the self-care could look like anything from having quiet time reading a book or, some time in nature. It's different for everybody, but that's massively important. And on that note, I want to share, we have really something very exciting. I'm stoked to share this with everybody listening that'll have opportunity to grab it. So Dr. Marilyn has written a really amazing guide for gut health. It has some wonderful information in there, some recipes, some tips, and just kind of ways to get in touch with you and learn more about your services. So that is going to be available in the show notes for anybody that wants to go ahead and give Marilyn a follow. Her Instagram will be in there as well, her contact information. Once you do that, she will email that to you and it'll be your gut guide. I looked at it. It's very all-encompassing. So took a minute to get through, but I love it. So that is her gift to everybody listening. So
enjoy.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to have met you.
Yes.
We met recently and just kind of like clicked. Yeah. It was one of instant, connection. So same kind of mindset. So I love it. And stay tuned for the next one.
Thanks.